Have you ever sat in the absolute silence of the late night, watching the shadows dance on the wall, and felt the heavy weight of a question you were too tired to ask out loud? It is that moment when the world is asleep, but your heart is wide awake, racing with worries about tomorrow. We have all been there, standing at the edge of our strength, wondering how much longer we can hold on. We find ourselves trapped in a season of waiting, where every door seems locked, and every path seems blocked by a mountain we didn't ask to climb. In these moments, we are often told to have sabr. We hear the word patience so often that we sometimes forget its true power. Sabr is not just about waiting. It is about how you act while you wait. It is the quiet, firm belief that the one who created the mountain is also the one who will help you over it. It is an active state of the soul that refuses to despair, even when the evidence of our eyes tells us there is no way out. We must hold on to the promise that the nature of reward is not just a small relief. In the deep wisdom of our faith, we are taught that what Allah gives after patience will shock you. This isn't just a comfort, it is a divine law. The shocking impact of this reward is designed to be so vast, so overwhelming, and so perfectly timed that it erases the memory of every tear you shed during the struggle. Let us begin the story of a man named Yusuf. Yusuf was a craftsman in a small, dusty town, a man whose hands were known for their skill in carving wood into beautiful, intricate designs. For years, his small workshop provided enough for his wife and their young daughter. They lived a life of simple gratitude. But then, a series of trials began to blow through his life like a cold, relentless wind. A drought hit the region, the economy collapsed, and suddenly, people no longer had money for hand-carved furniture. They needed bread, not beauty. Weeks turned into months. Yusuf's workshop grew quiet. The familiar scent of cedar and oak was replaced by the stale air of a room that hadn't seen work in a long time. One evening, Yusuf sat at his kitchen table, the light of a single candle flickering between him and his wife. The cupboards were nearly empty. His daughter was sleeping in the next room, unaware that her father had spent the afternoon selling his last set of professional tools just to buy a bag of flour and a few dates. The physical hardship was one thing, but the weight of feeling like a failure as a provider was a burden that threatened to break his spirit. This was his first real test of faith. It came not in the form of a great catastrophe, but in a whisper. A former business associate visited him that night, offering him a way out. The man suggested a deal that involved deceiving a wealthy traveler passing through town, a plan to sell low-quality wood disguised as an expensive antique. "It's just one time, Yusuf," the man whispered. "Allah knows your situation. He will forgive you. Don't you want to see your daughter eat well again?" Yusuf felt the pull of desperation. His stomach was empty, and his heart was heavy. He looked at his calloused hands, hands that had always been honest. The temptation to take the shortcut, to abandon his principles just for a moment of relief, was a fire in his chest. He stood at a crossroads. Would he choose the easy, clouded path, or would he choose the difficult, clear path of sabr? That night, Yusuf did not take the deal. He walked to his prayer mat instead. He stood in the darkness, his voice trembling as he whispered his prayers. He chose to trust that Allah's timing is never late, even when it feels like the sun will never rise. He understood that the delay in his provision was not a punishment, but a preparation. We often think that when we are in pain, we are being forgotten. But the truth is, the longer the night, the more spectacular the dawn. We are being tested to see if we will keep our character when we have nothing, so that we can be trusted with everything. Yusuf went to bed that night with an empty pocket but a full heart, resting in the knowledge that his sabr was being recorded. He did not know what was coming. He could not have imagined the scale of the blessing that was being prepared for him. He closed his eyes, unaware that the morning changed everything. To understand the journey of sabr, we must realize that the shocking impact is like a seed growing in the dark. Below the soil, nothing seems to be happening. It is cold, it is dark, and the seed is under immense pressure. But that pressure is what forces the seed to break open and grow. Without the struggle in the dark, the flower would never reach the light. Yusuf was in the darkness of the soil, waiting for the moment he would finally break through. The sun began to rise, casting long, golden fingers of light across the floor of Yusuf's empty workshop. After the night he had spent in prayer, refusing the path of dishonesty, the air felt different. It was as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. In our lives, we often expect change to come with a loud crash, but usually it arrives in the softest of whispers. As the sources remind us, the morning changed everything. Yusuf stood by his window, watching his daughter play in the dirt with a few smooth stones. She was laughing, oblivious to the fact that there was only one meal left in the house. The sight of her joy, despite their poverty, pierced his heart with a sharp, bittersweet pang. He felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him, the kind of tiredness that doesn't come from a lack of sleep, but from a year of carrying a heavy soul. He whispered a silent plea, "Ya Allah, I have closed the door to the haram, forbidden. I trust you to open the door to the halal, permissible." Just then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed on the gravel outside. A traveler, cloaked in a dusty, expensive robe, stood before Yusuf's door. He wasn't looking for a cheap trick or a quick deal. He carried a large, cloth-wrapped object in his arms. The man looked at Yusuf, not at his ragged clothes or his empty shelves, but directly into his eyes, searching for something. "I am looking for a man who values the wood more than the gold," the traveler said, his voice deep and weary. "I was told in the marketplace that there is a craftsman here who refused a dishonest fortune last night. I was told there is a man here who still fears his creator more than he fears hunger." Yusuf's heart hammered against his ribs. The news of his refusal had spread, but not as a scandal. It had spread as a testament. The traveler unwrapped the object. It was a fragment of a massive, ancient cedar gate from a distant masjid, intricately carved but split down the middle by time and weather. It was a masterpiece of history, now broken. "Many have offered to patch it with glue and paint," the traveler continued, "but I need someone who will give it the time it deserves. I need someone who has the sabr to treat every fiber of this wood with respect. I was told you are that man." This was the turning point. It wasn't just a job, it was a divine assignment. The traveler offered Yusuf a small bag of silver, enough to feed his family for months, just to begin the work. But the task was monumental. It would take weeks of meticulous, back-breaking labor with no guarantee of the final payment until the work was perfect. Yusuf looked at the silver, then at the broken wood, and finally at his wife, who stood in the doorway with tears of relief in her eyes. He realized that his trial wasn't over, it had simply shifted into a new phase. This was the nature of reward. Allah does not always remove the work. He provides the strength to do it and the means to survive while doing it. As Yusuf took his first chisel in hand, a tool he had to buy back with the traveler's initial silver, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. We often think that sabr is a passive state of waiting for things to get better. But Yusuf's journey shows us that true patience is an active, vibrating trust. It is the ability to see the shocking impact of Allah's mercy before it even manifests. Why does Allah test those He loves with such narrow paths? Why does He wait until the very last moment before sending the relief? It is because the reward is being prepared with as much care as Yusuf gave to that ancient cedar. If the reward came too early, we might think it was by our own hand. But when it comes after we have reached the very end of our rope, we know, without a shadow of a doubt, that it is from Him. The weight of the wood felt heavy in Yusuf's hands, but his spirit felt light. He began to carve, each stroke a prayer, each shavings a testament to his trust. He did not know that this gate was only the beginning. He did not know that the shocking impact promised to the patient was about to unfold in a way that would leave his entire village in awe. He only knew that he was no longer alone in his workshop. The morning had indeed changed everything, but the greatest change was not the silver in his pocket. It was the unwavering certainty in his heart that what Allah gives after patience will shock you. And as the days turned into weeks, the mystery of the traveler and the true purpose of the ancient gate began to reveal a plan far greater than Yusuf could have ever imagined. There is a specific kind of silence that exists at the peak of a mountain, a silence that is both terrifying and beautiful. In our journey of faith, we often reach a similar peak. It is the moment when we have given everything, when we have sacrificed our pride, our comfort, and our sleep, and yet, the struggle only seems to intensify. We expect that because we chose the path of sabr, the road should become smoother. But the reality is that the fire often burns hottest just before the gold is purified. This is the peak of the trial, the moment where the heart is stripped of everything except its connection to the Creator. Yusuf was living in this fire. For weeks, he had labored over the ancient cedar gate. The wood was unlike any he had ever worked with. It was as hard as stone and as stubborn as the years it had witnessed. Every stroke of his chisel required his entire being. His hands were no longer just calloused. They were cracked and bleeding, the red of his efforts staining the pale wood of the gate. He had used the traveler's initial silver to pay off old debts and buy medicine for his young daughter, Maryam, who had fallen into a deep, shaking fever. The workshop, once a place of hope, had become a chamber of endurance. One night, as the rain hammered against the thin roof, Yusuf's hand slipped. It wasn't a lack of skill, but a moment of sheer physical exhaustion. The chisel sliced deep into the palm of his right hand, his carving hand. He gasped, falling to his knees as the tool clattered onto the floor. He looked at his hand, then at the unfinished gate, and then toward the room where his daughter lay coughing. This was the peak of his hardship. He had refused the easy path of dishonesty. He had worked with total sincerity, and yet he was now injured. His child was sick, and the deadline for the traveler's return was fast approaching. A dark whisper entered his mind. Is this the reward for your honesty? Is this what your patience has brought you? This is the ultimate test of the soul, when the external world provides no evidence of Allah's mercy, and you must rely entirely on the internal conviction that He is Al-Wadud, the most loving. Yusuf wrapped his hand in a torn cloth, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't cry out in anger. Instead, he leaned his forehead against the cold, hard cedar of the gate. He realized that he had been relying on his own strength, his own skill, and his own hands. In this moment of total brokenness, he surrendered. He whispered, "Ya Allah, I am nothing, and you are everything. If this hand never carves again, I am still your servant. If this gate is never finished, I still trust your plan." This is the true nature of sabr. It is not a bitter endurance, but a sweet surrender. It is the understanding that when we are at our weakest, we are closest to the strength of Allah. We must hold onto the core truth found in the sources. What Allah gives after patience will shock you. The hardship is not a sign of abandonment. It is the narrowing before the great expansion. The shocking impact of the reward requires a heart that has been widened by the pressure of the trial. Yusuf stayed on the floor of his workshop for a long time, the scent of wet earth and cedar filling his senses. He felt a strange, profound peace settle over him, the kind of peace that only comes when you truly let go of the outcome and leave it to the best of planners. He managed to stand, his injured hand throbbing, and walked to his daughter's bedside. He placed his left hand on her forehead, reciting the names of Allah until the sun began to peek through the clouds. He did not know how he would finish the work. He did not know how he would pay for more medicine. He only knew that he had passed a threshold within himself. He had reached the peak of the mountain, and though his feet were bleeding, he was still standing. He closed his eyes for a moment of rest, unaware that the divine decree was already in motion. As the sources remind us, the darkest part of the night is always just before the dawn, and indeed, the morning changed everything. When the soul reaches the end of its own strength, it finally makes room for the strength of Allah. We often spend our lives trying to force doors open, bruised and exhausted from the effort, forgetting that the opener of doors is the one we should be calling upon. In the story of Yusuf, we see a man who had reached that absolute limit. He had surrendered his skill, his health, and his worries for his daughter into the hands of his Creator. And as the sources remind us, it is precisely in this moment of total reliance, this pinnacle of sabr, that the divine decree shifts. Because truly, what Allah gives after patience will shock you. Yusuf woke on his prayer mat as the first gray light of dawn touched the walls of his home. The silence was no longer heavy, it felt expectant. His first instinct was to rush to Maryam's side. He placed his hand on her brow, and for the first time in days, the skin was cool. Her breathing was deep and rhythmic. The fever had broken in the night, not through medicine he couldn't afford, but through a mercy he couldn't explain. This was the first sign. The morning changed everything. But the trial of the gate remained. Yusuf walked to his workshop, his right hand still bound in the blood-stained cloth. He looked at the massive cedar gate, its surface still rough and unfinished. He felt a wave of helplessness. How could a man with one hand do the work of a master? He picked up a chisel with his left hand, but it felt clumsy, almost useless. He sat on his stool and wept, not out of despair this time, but out of a profound realization of his own humanness. Then a sound came from the street. It wasn't the heavy footsteps of the traveler, but the chatter of many voices. A knock sounded at the workshop door, and before Yusuf could rise, it swung open. Standing there were 3 men from the village, fellow woodworkers who had once been Yusuf's rivals. Behind them stood the man who had offered Yusuf the dishonest deal days before. The man stepped forward, his head bowed in shame. "Yusuf," he began, his voice trembling. "I told the others what you did. I told them how you refused my offer when you were starving. I have spent my life cutting corners, but your silence and your steadfastness, it broke something inside me." He gestured to the craftsmen behind him. "They have come to offer their hands. They said a man with your heart should not have to carry the weight of this gate alone." This was the beginning of the shocking impact. Yusuf watched as the men set up their tools. They didn't ask for payment, they asked for his guidance. They recognized that while they had the strength in their hands, Yusuf had the vision in his soul. His injury, which he thought was the end of his career, became the reason the community gathered to support him. As the workshop filled with the sound of many chisels and the sweet scent of cedar, Yusuf realized a profound truth about the nature of reward. Sometimes, Allah does not just give you what you lost. He gives you a community, a legacy, and a restored sense of honor that money could never buy. The reward for his sabr was not just the completion of a gate. It was the transformation of the hearts around him. We must reflect on this. Yusuf's patience didn't just save his own soul. It became a light for others to find their way back to integrity. When you are patient for the sake of Allah, your struggle is never private. It ripples outward, touching lives you will never meet. The shocking impact is often much larger than our personal relief. As the sun rose higher, the gate began to transform. Under the collective effort of the village, the ancient wood started to glow with a beauty it hadn't possessed for centuries. But as the work neared its peak, a shadow fell across the threshold. The traveler had returned earlier than expected, and he was not alone. He was accompanied by guards wearing the crest of the capital's highest court. Yusuf stood, his bandaged hand tucked into his belt, his heart racing. The help had arrived, the work was beautiful, but the true nature of the traveler's mission was still a mystery. Was this help, or was it the beginning of a final, even greater test? The traveler stepped into the center of the workshop, the silence so thick it felt as though the world had stopped breathing. He looked at the gate, now a masterpiece of restored cedar, gleaming under the touch of the village craftsman, and then he looked at Yusuf's bandaged hand. The guards stood like statues, their presence radiating a weight that Yusuf had never felt before. "Yusuf," the traveler began, his voice no longer weary, but commanding and clear. "You thought I was a merchant seeking a repair, but I am the royal architect of the Sultan. 4 months, we have searched for a man who could lead the restoration of the Grand Masjid, not just a man with skilled hands, but a man with a heart that cannot be bought." He paused, placing a hand on the ancient gate. "The man who offered you the dishonest deal was my servant. It was a test, Yusuf. Many others took the gold and provided a lie. You chose hunger over a harvest of shadows. You chose sabr." The shocking impact of this revelation hit Yusuf like a physical wave. He had stood at the edge of ruin, thinking his life was falling apart, when in reality, every trial was a brick being laid for a future he could never have imagined. The traveler announced that Yusuf was to be appointed the master craftsman of the capital, with a workshop that would train the next generation of honest artisans. His debts were cleared by a royal decree, and his daughter's health was secured by the finest physicians in the land. As the sources remind us, what Allah gives after patience will shock you. Yusuf looked at his tired, bandaged hands and then at his daughter, who was now standing in the doorway, her eyes bright and full of life. He realized that the hardship hadn't been a wall, it had been a bridge. The morning had arrived, and truly, the morning changed everything. This is the nature of reward. We often pray for the relief of our problems, but Allah is preparing something much larger than a simple fix. He is preparing a transformation. Sabr is the soil in which the most beautiful miracles grow. It is the quiet confidence that the one who knows your tears also knows the exact second the sun must rise to dry them. If you are in your darkest night, right now, if your hands are tired and your heart is heavy, remember Yusuf. Your integrity is being watched. Your patience is being recorded. And the reward waiting for you on the other side of your endurance is designed by the Creator of the heavens to leave you in awe. Let us reflect on our own lives. How many times have we been frustrated by a delay, only to realize later that the delay was a protection? How many times have we lost something small, only for Allah to replace it with something vast? The shocking impact is a promise for those who remain steadfast. It is a divine signature on the life of the believer. We close this story with a humble dua. Ya Allah, the most merciful, the most kind. We ask you for a heart that finds peace in your decree and a soul that remains firm in times of trial. Give us the sabr of Yusuf, the sincerity of the righteous, and the strength to choose the right path even when it is difficult. Ya Allah, for every brother and sister currently in a season of waiting, let their morning be near. Shock them with your generosity, heal their wounds with your mercy, and let their reward be a testament to your infinite love. Ameen.